here down at the bottom is yearly. So that will show you all your numbers for the year up to date to make things a little bit easier for you. And then the very end tab, this one down here, wound etiology defined, we went through and created some definitions for different wound types, just so that everybody could be on the same page. Just thought it was a great way to start things off, and I'll show you how you can look at that information. So I'm just going to move into January, and I'll try not to move the screen around very much because I know that can be challenging when you're trying to look at things. So the date of consult. So you would just come in here and type in the date, and the year would come up for you. So you would do 23rd. Sorry, I did that incorrectly. There. So it would just come up with a year. The next selection that you can do is the method of consult. So these were what we came up with as a group. So it could be face-to-face, phone, email, electronic chart, telehealth, other, and not applicable. So you would select from that. So let's say it was face-to-face. The next box, location of consult. And this can all be adjusted. There are a number of different options in here. So let's say I'm going to pick unit 28. Then I could make comments in here if I wanted to around the location, just in case there was something in particular that you wanted to note. Anything that's a free text box, so this is here under location comments, the spreadsheet isn't going to calculate that information for you just because it's free text, but all the other drop-down boxes, it will do that. So you'll be able to see totals at the end. So when we looked at total time, we had to try to kind of break it down into sections. And so this is what we had decided as a group as the different options. So you would select the one that works for you. Patient name. I can't stress enough how important it is to keep your patient's names confidential. That being said, I usually, when I'm doing my tracking of my workload, I'll keep the patient's first initial and last name in my spreadsheet for that month. And then I delete all the names. The reason I do that is because when you move into the next section, you'll see patient type, and you can select new or return or non-applicable. And so that just helps you keep track if that's the same patient that you've seen before, because usually the initial assessments will take you a little bit longer. So we found that a helpful way to reflect that. The reason for consultation, you would select from here. So it just depends what you're tracking. In my world, I don't do a lot of continence management now. I do more edema management, ostomy, and mostly wound. So you could select whichever one applies. And in this case, you'll see that there are different ostomy options here. And if you're not doing any of them, you could select non-applicable. AEDL authorization is probably very specific to Alberta. It's Alberta Aids to Daily Living. They help with the cost share of supplies for patients, usually with ostomy supplies or equipment. So in this case, I'm going to select non-applicable. And just moving over in the spreadsheet, again, if you were dealing with an ostomy, you could then track which type of ostomy you're dealing with. In this particular circumstance, we're not dealing with an ostomy. And then the next one is the wound etiology. So these were the terms that we found were pretty standard across the board as far as what types of situations we deal with. And we've kind of selected a little bit of everything in here and then defined them later on. So we'll say this is a pressure injury. And then the wound treatment. So in this section, we were really just trying to capture some basic things that we do and tried to clarify what each of us thought was standard items that we do, and often enough to be able to include it as a drop down. So simple dressing, maybe something that's not going to take very long, staff could normally handle. Complex dressing, you guys can read the other ones in there, total contact cast or other. If you selected other, then you could put comments in. And then we also wanted to include some time in here for education. This could be done in a couple of different ways depending on your role. Again, it's associated with time. It could be education that you're providing to the staff or education that you're providing to the patient. So it would depend on how you guys wanted to track that. And then again, you could have a selection there for comments that you could write in. So hopefully that's pretty standard and makes sense to you guys. So just so I can show you what this looks like when there's information here, I'm going to move over to October. And you'll see, obviously I only worked for a couple of days in October. I've had this spreadsheet going for a while, trying to tweak it so it makes sense for everybody. So you see the consultation date and then how it was done. Most of my referrals come through an email process, so that's why you'll see I select email. If I needed to, I could go in here and change this and change my options, and I'll show you that in a few minutes how to do that. So then the next selection is which unit it is, that type of thing, and all the other items that you can see across the screen. So I'm just going to move across so you can see them. And so when you're looking at this, as I mentioned before, when you look at line 200, and again, I apologize for the scrolling. Just going to go down to line 200. So it is here that you can see the totals. So in that month, I saw in the month of October down here, I saw 23 patients. And most of them, the consults came by email. And then these are the totals for each unit. So hopefully that makes sense. I didn't have any location comments. And then you can see the time. Most of them are taking 46 to 60 minutes. And then when we look at the type, most of them are new. So it really just depends what information is of interest to you and information you want to track. Our main goal really is to try not, I know this probably seems complicated, try not to make it too complicated because it doesn't take very long to tire yourself out with trying to track this information. So try to keep it as standard and easy for you to do as possible. That's why we did a lot of drop-down boxes. So the reasons for consult, you can see 14 of them for wound management. Don't worry about this little square, that little triangle that shows up in the corner there. It's just a reference note. And then as we move along in the spreadsheet, you can see the totals for the different types and the different kind of wounds that we're seeing, and then the simpler complex. And sorry, you can't see that right now because now you can see the totals there. And then moves over to the times. And then I'm just going to move into November so you can see how that looks as well. I'm going to scroll back up to the top of the screen. So this might be something that you want to do on a daily basis. For me, what I'm trying to do is try to do it by the end of the day. And I try actually to try and put them in early if I can in the day, and try not to get too overwhelmed by if I miss something, at least I'm tracking some information that I wasn't tracking before. So just try and do the best that you can with it. If you're looking to make some changes to some of the selections that I have and what we've chosen here. So if we go under, sorry, I'll just take this to a new clean spot for you to see. So let's say I want to change my method of consult by face-to-face, phone, email, electronic chart, telehealth, or other. I don't do a lot of telehealth. So if I just go down to the bottom of the screen and I right-click, sorry, and I select unhide, and I'll put this in the notes as well. I can go in here and say method of consult. That's my heading that runs across this top bar here. So all of these headings here are going to show up in this box. And I'm going to say OK to the method of consult. And then I can make a change in there. So I could take out the telehealth and put in something else, maybe text message or something else that I'm doing. And that allows me to move forward. So you also have yearly TAP calculations here at the end. So this will bring up everything for the year. If you've done the calculations all the way along in the different months, and it just helps summarize it. From here, you could go into more complex things within Excel, different ways of showing things, pie charts or bar graphs, that kind of thing. I didn't, when we talked about this as a group, we didn't want to get that complicated with everything. We just wanted to make sure that we could see the totals. And then from there, we could do what we wanted with those totals, however we want to show that work or whoever we're having to share that with information with. We just wanted to focus on what those values were versus fancy tables and charts and that kind of thing. So hopefully that makes sense. And I want to leave some time for questions. So I'm going to move into the wound etiology definitions. So for each of these terms, if you hover up around this little red triangle in the corner, it will give you a definition. And so these were standard definitions that we were able to agree on and find. And if you're needing to read more about them, you can click in the little box and you can see that information. And so we did that for all of these, just so that everybody was kind of on the same page when you were trying to decide your wound types. So hopefully that makes sense. And maybe now we can, if there's any questions.
Great. So if you do have a question and you don't want to ask it over the Zoom program, you can type into the chat box and we will make sure that the question gets to Karen. Anybody have any questions, any comments?
Hi, it's Marilyn. I just have a comment. Just Karen, you're too modest. You did an excellent job on this Excel table because it's way beyond my expertise for sure. And I find it very useful. I do use it every day. And I'm like you. It's like at the end of the day, I try to get, you know, basically my statistics of who I've seen in the day, etc. I do like you too. I use just the first initial and last name, and then I delete it at the end of the month. And I do like, I find it very valuable to have those running totals at the end of the month, so I can see how many colostomy patients I saw, how many ileostomy, how many urostomy, and the different kind of wounds too. I find that useful for doing monthly statistics. So thank you.
Thank you. It was a team effort.
Yeah, so we have a question that's come in. I love this, very simple and organized. What about if you have one patient with multiple wounds and etiologies? Do you enter it as 2 consults with separate times? Thanks.
I think for things like that, when we talked about stuff like that in our group, our very small working group, it would be up to whoever was using the tool and just consistency with how you're doing it. So it probably might be easier to enter them in as a separate occurrence, and then that's the way you would treat all of your patients that way. So just as long as you're consistent with it. And the tool is really just to reflect what type of wounds that you're dealing with or ostomies and the amount of time that you're spending on it. So you could also just put it in the comments section. It would just depend on your preference. If you're doing that a lot, maybe you want to spell them out a little bit more and you'd want each one to be a separate occurrence. Does that answer that question?
Yes, yes, thank you. Okay, any other questions on the first portion of this presentation? And just so you know, we are recording this and this will be posted in the archived videos on the nswoc.ca website under webinars. Okay, any other questions? Okay.
It's Marilyn in BC. Hi.
Hi, Marilyn.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, you can go right ahead.
I'm going to type in my question. Hi.
Okay.
I had a question. What if you had a patient with multiple wounds
Marilyn, you did cut out. Are you asking if you have a patient with multiple wounds, do you enter it as 2 consults, or is it a different question? I think Marilyn, there's something that's gone down on your.
Yes.
Was that your question? That's the question Karen just answered.
So I just had said that it would depend on how you want to deal with those situations, because you're the one who's going to be using the tool on your end. So if you want to do them as separate items, you could do that. It would just depend on what you're trying to reflect at the end of the day. Right? If you know, for you, if it's key to know how many different wound types you're dealing with versus the number of patients that you're seeing, you would use it in different ways. I would just recommend that you try and be consistent with it. And you can always make comments in the comments section, but the tool wouldn't track that for you. And really, the data collection tool is really just sort of a starting point. I think all of us were doing separate things in our area. I know Michelle and Marilyn and I were all doing different things to try and track the same information. And so we thought it would be great if everybody sort of had a similar tool, so we're kind of using the same language. It could work from there. The plan is that we will post this, I think, in the member section on the association's website. And I think Kathy could share my email with you, or you guys already have my email. You can always email if you have any other questions, and we can go over specifics. But I'll try and put as much information in this instructions for use tab at the very beginning. So I'll add in a little bit more information before I send it off to Kathy. So hopefully that helps.
Okay.
Any other questions? We're okay?
Okay, so I think we can move on to the second portion of the presentation of the CNA education tracking tool. And if you do have any other questions about the first portion of the presentation, if you think of something, just type it into the chat box and we'll make sure we bring it up at the end.
Okay. So you can see that screen now, Kathy?
Yes, it's perfect.
Thanks. So this tracking tool, it would just came from myself going a little bit insane when I was trying to do my recertification. I thought I had a pretty good method for tracking my education. I used to just take things and put them in a binder and keep them there when I was doing my not certification, but my renewal of my license within my province as a registered nurse. And that worked for that. But when I moved into the NSWAC world and I wrote my CNA exam, I wanted to track my information a little bit more accurately. And as time went on, I found that more of the sessions I was attending were more webinar type things. And so it was harder to have that piece of paper at the end of the day to throw into my binder. And so again, as I said before, I use Excel for quite a few things. I thought it would be an easy way for me to track the information. And now what I do in my practice is I actually put it in before I even attend a session, just so I know it's there. And if I don't end up attending something, I can take it out if I need to. So I'm just going to, so you can see that the objectives. So this is, just to be clear, this isn't a tracking tool from the Canadian Nurses Association. It's just a tracking tool that I'm sharing with the group and other members, and hopefully you'll find it helpful. And so I wanted to show you what the Canadian Nurses Association tool looks like, because some of you might not be familiar with it. So this is basically what it is. It's a Word document. And so one of the challenges I found with dealing with this one is that if I needed to put entries in and my dates weren't lining up, I'd have to redo it all again. So that was really throwing me off, because as I thought about things more and I looked at their rules and their regulations, I found that there was actually other things like board member time that I spent that I could use those hours towards my certification renewal. And so I just found it a little bit challenging. So that's why I thought I would try and create something else for myself that would work. And I'm hoping maybe you guys will find it useful as well. So I'm just going to out of this PowerPoint. And sorry. Okay. All right. So this looks like a busy tool. So I'll just go into a blank version of it just so that you can see. So you would enter the date, same as before. Practice area. So for me and for the CNA, I found it really helped to break things down into a wound, ostomy, continence, edema, or other education. So as I said, I use this for my registration as a registered nurse in Alberta. So sometimes other is applicable because maybe I've picked a different practice standard. So I just wanted to have a tool that could do both for me. So you would just select whichever one it is for you. You would enter the title in just text box. And then one of the things that they may request, I think probably from your licensing body as a nurse, as well as the CNA, they may audit your work and your tracking of your education. So it's helpful if you can put in who provided the session. So in this case, it would be the NSWAC Association, or maybe it's your health authority, that type of thing. And then the type of presentation it is as well. Just helpful if you can put in if it was a webinar or if you attended it face-to-face. Again, it's just a text box that you would enter in. The length of time, and then calculation into hours. So that's just the blank sheet. So I'm going to take you into part of mine for 2019. So again, you can see the dates is there, the practice setting, some of them are wounds, some of them are ostomy. Just the titles, I just copy and paste them in. If it's a webinar, whoever puts it on, and how that works, whichever type of session it is. And then you'll see up here, it says total for 2019. The easiest way to calculate the math for this was just to take it in minutes and then have it calculated out in hours. It was just an easier way to use the tool so that you can see the hours for that year. I'm going to flip down into 2018. And again, you could see the hours again. It's got the total up there. So you would have to do the math here and total up your 5 years. So what I've done with my spreadsheet is just have 5 years on it. And then I'll keep track of it because I had to renew in 2017. So one of the things I thought would be helpful, because I found I was going back and forth a lot with CNA information to figure out what was trackable and what wasn't. Just going to scroll up here. I've copied and pasted in some of their information just to help us understand sort of what is required for the renewal and what calculates out to be something that you can actually track and how you can track that. And just in case you're running into problems and you want to check out their website, I included the link here as well, so you could go to their website for more details. And then I put in the information here around the amount of time that you're having to track. So as you guys can imagine, and I'm sure some of you have already done this, 100 hours seems really overwhelming. But when you keep track of it on a regular basis, I probably attend some sort of education, probably on a weekly basis. So there is a lot that you do over that 5 years. It's just a matter of keeping track of it and keeping things as easy as possible when you have to renew. So all the information is here, and I'm just going to scroll down so you can see a little bit more. You can kind of see the rules around it as to which type of thing is counted, how long you can count it for, things like being a board member for an association. They have a maximum of 25 hours for that 5-year span. So there are little things like that that are important to know. And those are things that you can access easily. And so I've also added in here, just as this is copied and pasted right from their website. And I wanted you guys to have the link just in case things change. It's easy for you to go back and check to see what their rules are. So they have different guidelines around different types of education, whether it's a course you've took or you're participating in research, conferences, that type of thing. And these don't link through here, but they do when you go to their website. And some of the common ones I've kept down at the bottom. I've expanded them so that you can see what their rules are around that. So if you've read an article, things like that are the things that you can track. And so I think those are the probably simpler things that we forget to track. And then when it's time to renew, it becomes a little bit overwhelming because we didn't know that in the beginning. So just wanted to keep it fairly straightforward for everybody so that you know what's included and what you can track. So I'll move down. So memberships. So you can see here it says you can claim a maximum of 25 hours for that activity, and that's over those 5 years. If you've done presentations, which I'm sure a lot of you guys do, in your work environments, obviously the time that you create, time that you take to prep for it, and these are the kind of things that I like for this. I didn't even think to do that, to include that. So it's just kind of that reminder for you that you can track things like that, and that those can be included in your renewal. And if you've done something provincially, or if you're doing a conference, precepting also, you can collect time for that as well. Again, that's probably something that we tend to forget. And that 40 hours will be over that 5-year span again. So just to remember that. And then the things that you can include in regards to being a preceptor for students that you guys have. And then the next one is just around webinars, which I think is quite common for us to collect, and other activities. So if you're involved in participating in some sort of standards or things with the board or anything like that, you can claim again another 15 hours for that activity. And again, that's over the 5-year span. So we just included that just as a sort of a quick reference so you can go double check to see what CNA says. I'm going to flip into the next tab here, which is just the template. So really, this is just a standard tab that you can create another one with, and then you would just change the name or the title of the tab down here where it says 2017. And I have instructions in here as well as to how you can do that, because my memory is not so good some days, and so I have to look back to remember how I do these things. So I've included that in here as well. How you can go about changing the spreadsheet app for your next year, how you go in and change that year so that it calculates. So that information is here as well. And if there's anything else that we think would be helpful to track or have instructions on, I can include it here. And then this is just the practice area. So when I looked at the spreadsheet under the 2017 and the different years, I broke mine down into these practice areas. And so if that's something that you guys wanted to change and make it in different ways to track different things for you, maybe you've selected a different standard of practice for your registration as an RN for your province, and maybe you want to track something there, you would just change these titles in here, and then that would automatically change your options in your drop-down box here as to what type of practice area it was. For the certification for the CNA, it's for all 3 practice areas. I know I selected edema out here to be a little bit separate, but really edema just becomes a big part of our wound care management, I think. Most of the patients we probably see, we end up seeing them for their wound care, and the edema is related to that sometimes. So that is that tool. It's pretty straightforward. I know I went over that fast. Does anyone have any questions about it?
We do have a comment here. It's, wow, I just wrote my CNA exam, so this spreadsheet could not have come at a better time. Thank you so much for these lovely documents. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Hopefully it helps us all.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see all of the different aspects of and types that can contribute to continuing education. And I think you really did a good job of profiling that. Okay, we have a question here. Do you then handwrite from your spreadsheet onto the CNA tool?
No, I don't actually. It says on the CNA website that you can submit your own tool as long as it makes sense to them and isn't too complicated for them to figure out. And so I had just had submitted my spreadsheet to them. And that was, they appreciated that. It kept it simple for them. So I think as long as you're tracking it and it's pretty straightforward, I don't think they would have any issues with that.
Thank you. That, let me just see, that is wonderful. Thank you for this excellent tool. Do you need to submit attendance certificates, or is that only if you're being audited?
Only, I think, if you're being audited. And so that was the type of thing that stressed me out because you don't get those types of things anymore, really, when you attend sessions. So I think it's just a matter of you keeping track of the day that it was, the title of the presentation, so you could always go back to that if you needed to. So I think they're really just looking for you keeping track in an honest way of what you did, because a lot of the things are electronic now with webinars, and you don't really often get a printed certificate. And really, at the end of the day, the certificate is probably something that, is not really that official.
Yeah, that's a good point. Any other questions or comments? Any other typed messages or comments or questions?
I'm wondering how the people on the call currently track their education for their renewal, their certification. If anybody's willing to share. It's a quiet group. They're probably tired. It's been a long week already.
Yeah.
Hi, Karen. It's Marilyn in Alberta. I was doing what you were doing and just putting everything into a binder.
Mm-hmm.
And I miss a lot of stuff. Like even this hour webinar could be counted, could it not?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, this will be a really good tool to keep track a lot better than I have been. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
And that's what I found. I just keep a copy of this on my computer at work, keep a shortcut to it from my desktop, and I can just quickly go in and put in whatever it is I attended. And as you said, Marilyn, sometimes you miss a lot of things. So even doing it this way, I'm sure I'm still missing things like tracking the hours that it took to create the presentations and stuff like that. I don't really think about those things as being activities, but they definitely are. So I think that's the things that we need to focus on so that we just make this an easier process for everybody.
We have another comment. So far, I just used the CNA form is one comment. Another person says, I keep a binder of certificates from sessions and conferences, but not things like presentations or other education. Good to know. And one last one here. I have recertified twice now and have used a table, but this makes it look really easy.
Hopefully it will be. And if if what you're currently using works for you and you find the CNA tool is easy for you to keep track just by typing things in, then that's a great thing. It's just options, right? Hopefully we can all find something that just makes it easier for us. I don't think there's very many of us who want to challenge the exam versus keeping track of our education.
Any last comments or questions?
It's Joan Peddle from Moncton.
Hi, Joan.
I've used the CNA tracking sheets as well, but I agree with Karen that we do a lot of things that we miss and don't write down for time. So I find this really is going to be helpful. Thank you.
Excellent. And there's another comment here. I apologize, I missed the beginning of the webinar. Just wondering where I can have access to these Excel templates. They're very useful tools. Thank you for sharing.
Very welcome. I will, before the end of the week, over the weekend, I might take a little bit of time just to make sure that I've included some other instructions to make it easier for you. I will share them with Kathy, and then I think they'll be posted on the member section of the NSWAC website.
Yes, and as I mentioned, we are archiving past webinars by title and date, and so you'll be able to access the webinar and the tools in the webinar section of the website. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so Karen, on behalf of NSWOCC, I'd like to thank you for your time and for your ongoing commitment to improving and advancing NSWOC practice. I know that a lot of people will benefit from these tools, and also thank you for your contributions to the Research and Practice Core program. Karen filled that role for a couple of terms anyway, and really contributed a lot, including the ECF and EAF guideline or best practice recommendations. So they're also available under the education tab of our website. So thank you very much, Karen, and look forward to seeing what you're going to be working on next.
Thank you. And again, thank you to Marilyn and Michelle for the data collection tool. That was a lot of hard work. So
Yeah.
thank you everyone for taking the time, and hopefully these will help you save some time at the end of the day.
Okay, and our next webinar will be Wednesday, December the 4th, with Dr. Karen Campbell and Laura Robbs, and they'll be talking about the microclimate and linen and layers, and relating it to skin prevention. So we look forward to having all of you participate in that webinar as well. So thank you very much for your time.